Jerry used to boast about being able to sell bathing suits in Alaska. He was Mr. Charm himself. Jane was, of course, one of the great cabaret singers of her generation, and we were all, Annie, me, my mom, and my dad, great fans of hers. With seeming suddenness, here were Annie and I, little Midwestern kids really, spending time with an international glamour girl and her handsome Svengali from the Bronx. Holy moly. That winter, Jerry promoted my first gig on TV, The Merv Griffin Show, where I not only sang but chatted with the host, and my first gig in Acapulco at the annual RCA Winter Trade Show, after which he invited Annie and me to join him and Jane at the beach house where they were staying. We were charmed. One weekend, Annie and I went to New York and used the Weintraub's very posh apartment on West 56th Street, high above the city's cares and woes. It went far beyond any idea either of us had at the time of what constituted elegance. My star might have been on the rise, but we were nowhere near this class. We both felt the allure. When Jane opened at the Plaza, Annie and I had a ringside table, and Jerry had Jane make a big deal of me. It seemed as if everybody in show business and politics was there, including the mayor of New York, John Lindsay, and the famous designer of Jane's gowns was there, with 5 models on his arms. Holy moly again. When Jane sang Leaving on a Jet Plane and introduced me, I was overwhelmed. This was decidedly a step up from the Gollywog Bar at the Ritz-Sheraton in Minneapolis. Being there was exciting and challenging, and enormous new vistas were opening before me. Annie felt it too. Some of it, I think, might have happened too fast for her. She liked Jerry and Jane. They were among the most interesting people we knew. The problem was, Annie disliked being Mrs. John Denver. Understandably, the hullabaloo that was attached to that didn't mesh with her sense of self. Out on the road, I think she felt very much in my shadow. She was interested in sounding out her own depths, and there weren't many people out there to acknowledge that. In New York, in the fall of 1970, I started to cut my 4th album for RCA, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. We put off doing the mix until after the holidays. As I said earlier, the Cellar Door in Washington had booked me as a headliner for the first time, and I was opening the day after Christmas. Annie came with me, and our old friends Bill and Taffy Danoff, Fat City, were the opening act. It was like a family reunion, so we were feeling very good about seeing one another and about working together in the days ahead. The first night, the audience was very responsive. After the show, full of ourselves, Annie and I took off for a late-night get-together at the Danoffs. We rode along with Chris O'Connor, otherwise known as K.O., who managed the Cellar Door and would soon join my show as road manager, and his wife Bonnie. By the time we got to Bill and Taffy's house, we were wired and wide awake, and we ended up sitting around amid 15 sleepy-eyed cats singing songs to one another. At one point, Bill brought out a song he had been working on, which he said he didn't seem to be able to go anywhere with. He hoped I might have some thoughts on what to do with it. He and Taffy played it through, while I followed along, and we kept at it. I wrote a bridge finally, and maybe the second verse, and when we finished, Annie and I went off to sleep for the rest of the day. That night, Taffy and Bill did their show. I did mine, and afterward, when I got a standing ovation, I brought them back on stage with me, and we did the new song, Take Me Home Country Roads. The place went crazy. I think I'm most myself when I'm writing a song because I'm trying to be honest with what's happening. I'm open. I'm really listening. You're in touch with a whole spectrum of moods. You really are. You listen to this thing that's going on in your head, and the thoughts take direction. Suddenly there is a line of words on your tongue, and that one line brings with it hundreds of others. And then it depends on the day, and on the season, and on where you are, late winter, early spring in Minnesota, for example. One year I was inspired by early spring in Minnesota to write 4 great songs in one day. The moods came on. The first draft of a song is usually in my head when I sit down to learn it on the guitar. Sometimes the melody has to be changed, but once you get it started, once you sit down and learn it with the instrument, the learning of it, actually being able to sing it, leads you someplace. It's the discovery of your song that's so wonderful. In fact, if I start out thinking I'm in control of it, it doesn't work. There were times when I'd be struggling with a song, and then when I'd get out of the way, the song would be there, in neon lights, right in front of me. It's a way of looking, I think. What you need to see comes forward once you stop trying to see it. I wrote Annie's song riding up in a ski lift one day, early in 1974. It was soon after our first serious separation, and we'd just come back together. There was nobody on the mountain when I started out that day, no lines. I skied down this very tough run, all out of breath, my heart pounding, my thighs burning. I skied right on to the lift. I was riding up again, sitting there, catching my breath, looking down at where I'd just been a few moments ago, all this physical stuff going on, when suddenly I was hypersensitive to how beautiful everything was. The sky was a blue you only see from mountain tops. Then I became aware of the other people skiing, the colors of their clothes, the birds singing, the sound of the lift, the sibilant sound of the skiers going down the mountain. All of these things filled up my senses, and when I said this to myself, unbidden images came one after the other. The night in the forest, a walk in the rain, the mountains in springtime. All of the pictures merged, and then what I was left with was Annie. That song was the embodiment of the love that I felt at the time. The embodiment of that emotion was this person, my wife. So the song got to be about her and about all of my complex feelings in regard to her. In the 10 minutes it took to reach the top of the mountain, the song was there. I skied back down, drove home, went up to my office, and learned the song and the guitar. In my songs, I could say things that I didn't seem able to say directly to Annie. I needed the form and the music to help me communicate. And even with the music, what was frustrating was the feeling of never seeming to complete the communication. When I started recording, I'd come home from the studio with a song I was working on finally sounding like what I had heard in my head, and I'd play it for Annie, and she would turn professional on me. Isn't there too much echo? Aren't the drums too loud? Isn't the guitar out of tune? It's as if she was indifferent to the song itself. She claimed, in fact, to have fallen in love with me despite my songs, not because of them. Whatever meaning Annie's song had for me on a personal level, there was also a larger context. I wrote it to speak to what is universal in the human experience, to transcend a couple of lovers. It could just as easily have been about love for a brother, or a father, or a friend. It could just as easily have been a prayer. Poems, Prayers, and Promises. Meeting Jerry Weintraub in the cosmic flow was like aspiration meeting inspiration. We were braves from two different tribes, two streams of experience, but with a common language. It was synergy in play. Our friendship was going to defy gravity. Unless you are a movie star and an agent is doing your bidding, your personal manager is your most important professional relationship. It's all a big case of trust, and if you're lucky, this person becomes your best friend. If he's good and smart, he's going to put you in situations that give you a chance to grow. With Jerry, that was true in spades. It was Hal Thaw who knew Jerry and got the two of us together, though both Hal and Milt Oken said later that they were surprised that it worked out between us. Temperamentally, we were dead opposites. When I got older and more experienced, the moral ambiguities of working with Jerry became clearer. I think Hal and Milt probably understood him better than I ever did, but professionally it was a brilliant matchup, and that's how I approached it. By way of explaining his thinking, Jerry would often say, sometimes more than once in a conversation, that he was a street kid from New York. He wasn't one to harbor doubts. What he harbored was schemes. He was full of schemes. Schemes for promotions, schemes for everything. Even as we shook hands at that first meeting, his mind was sizing up the situation and me. Jerry was large of stature, so when he came on very strong, whether it was in his charming mode or that darker side when he let himself be overcome with anger. I witnessed this only rarely, though, because it was important to Jerry not to be seen losing control. He was about 31 then, not a great deal older than I was, although he seemed older because of his experience. and he reminded me a little of a fleshy young Elvis Presley, his mouth especially. He curled his lip and smiled the way Elvis did, and had the hair and the profile to go with it. Frankly, he looked lethal. In the entertainment industry, he was just the kind of guy you wanted on your side. He was very smart about people, very sharp, always a bit ahead of whoever he was dealing with, working out the angles, as if he were still the pool shark of his youth. I was 26 at the time, and he read me like a book. What he wanted to do was put me to work on television, but he'd see how I came across first before committing himself. We'd play it by ear. Remember, this was at a relatively early stage in the development of television programming. Not many popular singers were being welcomed by the medium. Elton John, to cite just one example, couldn't find work on American television at that point. He was too much of an exotic. That was true of almost everybody in rock music, and folk singers fared no better. Neither the Mitchell Trio as a group, nor I as a solo performer, could have bought our way onto a show. Jerry, from the very beginning, touted my down-to-earth unpretentiousness as a quality that people would welcome into their living rooms. What made it synergy was that I delivered on Jerry's opening. John Denver, this creature of mine, came across on the TV screen, and came across very well. Even though I was still one uncertain person, I have to admit there was something in what I was projecting that held together. The granny glasses, the long hair, the slightly Western twang, the slightly self-deprecating sense of humor. In the midst of this inspiring beginning with Jerry, we recorded Take Me Home Country Roads, and it turned into a phenomenon. The song came out as a single before the album, and for the first time, Jerry was truly excited about what we were doing. Actually, it took a long time for that record to happen, and while we all had a hand in making it go, Jerry worked at it tirelessly, leveraging all the promotional possibilities, making RCA work hard to straighten out all the production kinks that surfaced, and following up on the shipping of the record. He promoted me with ingenious schemes, too. Through the summer, the song got into the national bloodstream. It first aired in Minneapolis, where Annie and I were still living. I had taken the record around to a very hot disc jockey named Johnny Canton at station WDGY, who liked the song and gave it tremendous play. After that, word of mouth moved it. The same thing happened from city to city. In fact, that became the pattern for all of my hits. First, the disc jockeys would support my work, then RCA would notice what was happening and push to have the records played. Come September, I was no longer John Denver, writer of Leaving on a Jet Plane. I was John Denver, the guy you heard on the radio singing that song yesterday. On a return visit to Merv Griffin's show, a fellow guest, the boxer Rocky Graziano, initiated me in the art of mimicking myself when well-wishers recognized me in public places, like airports. I think I had a gift for it. I enjoyed making people laugh, particularly since I'd always taken myself so seriously. In fact, eventually I got to mimic myself on the Bob Hope Show, the two of us dressed alike in granny glasses and long mops of hair, 2 John Denvers instead of 1. I'd do 25 albums for RCA over the next 15 years, and all of them were greatly influenced by Milt Oken and his song repertoire. The Ballad of Spiro Agnew, which I recorded on the first album, says it all. There's Milt, whose music went back to the Weavers and their songs of social conscience, and me, a young white boy from a military family, trying hard to be more than a sympathetic supporter of the civil rights and anti-war movements. But I had a dream, too, which started to form way back at the top of those eucalyptus trees I climbed in Tucson. I think of the parable of the 5 talents. I'd been given these gifts, my voice, my upbringing, my personality, my songwriting ability, and I wanted very much to do things with them. I was intrigued with the idea of continuing to develop my talents, exploring the outer limits. I wanted to go around the world utilizing these gifts. I saw something out there. By the time Poems, Prayers, and Promises was out, I think I'd broken through to that place. Now the opportunity to do all of that was at hand. During my earlier work in L.A. and in my days with the Mitchell Trio, I was learning my trade. Whatever I was going to do, I wanted to do it well. At that time, my trade was being an entertainer. I hadn't yet written any songs. As part of that training, I was learning what I could do with music, even learning how to play the guitar, because I hadn't ever really worked hard at being a guitar player, but mostly learning different songs. A song on the radio would catch my ear, and I'd want to know it. I'd be haunted by some image it shaped for me. With the trio, a whole new vein of material was made available to me, and my sense of the entertainer's role broadened. I started to find out that there is a lot more you can do with music on a stage than just sing it. You can make people think. You can make them laugh at things going on in the world. Sometimes you can even make them laugh at themselves, which is the hardest thing to do, and everybody needs that. The satirical stuff we did in Washington, poking fun at the president, was a big, big thing for me to do. It was exciting to have an impact like that. It was a revelation to me when I could make a bridge to an audience's psyche. You could also be passionate with your voice. When I sang solos, I gravitated to songs like Mr. Tambourine Man and The Bells of Rimney because I liked the dynamic range I could give them. I could communicate a lot of feeling with my voice, which I was not able to do by just sitting down and talking with somebody. There was something about the emotional registers in my voice that worked for people, that communicated to them without my being consciously aware of it or understanding it. In fact, I feel I've begun consciously using those registers only in the last 10 years. And then gradually my aspirations shifted, and I started writing songs of my own, trying for my own effects. This was also a revelation, particularly in what it taught me about communicating. People who listened to Leaving on a Jet Plane thought it was about war, and probably those identifications are what made the song a hit for Peter, Paul, and Mary. We were once again a country of young soldiers going off to fight a war. That wonderful phrase in the song, "I don't know when I'll be back again," brought all the yearnings out in the open. But for me, the wistfulness had more to do with the simple facts of my life at the time. I was living in hotels, going from place to place, performer on one hand and anonymous on the other. I remember when I started to pen those words, I was thinking of Gordon Lightfoot's In the Early Morning Rain, a big old airplane on the ground getting set to go. Of course, I see all of this so clearly only in retrospect. At the time, I was just living. On the stage, with my own material and all these effects at my disposal, I could really get into it. Wistfulness was just one of the emotions I was exploring. The other place I broke through to with the success of Country Roads, less happily in retrospect, was the true subject of life on the road. Not that I hadn't had innocent amours before, but now I began playing around double time. It was the old story of success playing havoc with moral inhibitions. I found myself away from Annie more and more, and the circles of our lives seldom converged. I convinced myself that what I was doing didn't matter, that it didn't affect Annie. I was just experiencing the excitement of somebody new and different. I had no sense of the pain it could cause. I hadn't developed that understanding yet. That was to come later, out of my own pain. I couldn't understand in my naivete why Annie would look at it differently. If she wasn't going to be with me, if she wasn't going to include me in her life, I couldn't see how she could deny me my romantic inclinations. You came off a show, having bared heart and soul, and the adrenaline was working. Talking with your buddies took you only so far back to so-called normality. You could admire the design of your hotel suite only up to a point. There were attractive women around. If they were available, and a little challenging in their availability, and soft and warm, that spelled romance for me, and I could not resist. I started living a lie with Annie.